We're all in uncharted territory looking for ways to support our communities. At Dell Technologies, we're making sure small businesses have the right tech solutions. Dell Technologies advisors are here for you, from helping small businesses stay connected and productive while working remotely with Windows 10 and Microsoft Teams, to rapidly deploying remote work solutions that limit upfront costs with Dell Financial Services. We're standing by you every step of the way. Call 877-ASK-DELL. That's 877-ASK-DELL.
The Best of Golic and Wingo podcast is presented by Capital One. This is Banking Reimagined.
It's so good to hear those music used somewhere else beside either, neither, or both on our show. Glad you're with us. Golic and Wingo, ESPN Radio, ESPN2. We are presented by Progressive Insurance. Mike Golic Jr., Trey Wingo here with you. Hope wherever you are, your Monday's off to a good start. You are safe and healthy. And I want you to think about this as we begin a new work week in the environment that we're in. As bad as things may be, at least you're not the Adidas executive that said, yeah, we can't really make a shoe for Michael Jeffrey Jordan.
Wow.
My God, that was one of the big takeaways from last night's 2 episodes of The Last Dance. Adidas said they couldn't put together a shoe. That was like the job, right? The job is for the shoe company to put together a shoe, and that was their reason they didn't, because Michael Jordan wanted Adidas.
I think episodes 5 and 6 were a reminder of what a different landscape we were dealing with when Jordan first came into the league, because to hear the phrase, a young upstart Nike, who were sort of like the outliers and the up and comers at the time, is a hilarious notion as we sit here today.
So the best thing I can do right now, especially for the younger generation, is give the comparison. Because this was about shoes, we'll get into what Spot Built offered, Adidas offered, and by the way, that's where Michael Jordan wanted to go, and we'll tell you why he flew to Nike and took that meeting, and someone you should always listen to in your life. Yeah. But he signed his deal with Nike. His first deal was $250,000. Zion Williamson just signed a $75 million deal. So you have a rookie in 1984 to a rookie in 2019. Someone else can do this isn't simple math. Yeah. What that percentage increase is from 250,000 to 75 million.
And one happened because of the other.
Well, that's exactly right.
100%.
Every Nike deal, LeBron's was actually worth more. LeBron's was, I think, 87 or 90 million. Actually, who was it? Somebody offered LeBron more. It was Reebok actually offered LeBron 115 million, which he turned down. But yeah, every Nike deal, there should be a percentage going to Jordan, because Nike isn't Nike without Jordan taking a flyer on this upstart Nike.
Well, that's like every PGA Tour player, when they cash a check, should give it 10% to Tiger, because he's why the pot's that good.
Well, and I think just in general, I think it was I forget who it was on our air talking about this documentary, essentially saying if it were not for signature shoes and what Michael Jordan did for that notion, you're probably not getting a lot of what we've got now. The fact that he revolutionized the idea of, you can so specifically market, because we saw the Converse commercial leading into this whole scene, talking about the current landscape of sneakers in the NBA back in 1984. It was all of these guys, and Converse was the big bad boss on the block.
They were.
In all this one. And it was that big group ad you saw with all those guys.
Trying to rap. Larry Bird trying to rap.
It was
the outtakes had to be pretty brutal.
Yeah, you're not kidding. But basically Converse said, we can't market Michael Jordan above all these guys. So, sorry, we're out.
And it was Nike basically saying, hey, no, we believe not only in this guy, but then in the future idea. Now, you can take one athlete in particular and give them a platform, give them their own signature, and it's going to sell.
And to that point, it's going to sell. They were hoping they would sell $3 million worth of Michael Jordan shoes over 3 years?
Over the first 3 years, they wanted to sell $3 million worth.
And in the first year, they sold $126 million.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
Now, I don't know. Do you remember the first person you ever saw wearing Air Jordans?
No, I do not.
I remember, because we were in college at that time, and some guy, we were doing intramural basketball in our fraternity league, and some guy showed up wearing the original Jordan 1s, and we were like, "Damn!"
We were like, "Oh wow!" I wonder what they
He's
cost
got the
back
shoes.
then. Would you know that?
I wouldn't know offhand.
I think they were like
no.
$70.
I think they said it on one of the ads
thought
that
they
we
did.
saw in the documentary.
Maybe
it
they
sounded
said
like it was around $108.
$108 with tax, I think, was the line. Yeah.
How about this for a money line? November 16th, 1984. Michael Jordan had played 10 NBA games at that point, and Jordan Brand wasn't yet created. Nike's stock price then was 11 cents. 11 cents. The next day, Jordan wore the Nike Air Jordan for the first time in an NBA game and had one of his worst games of the season. He scored 15 points on 4 of 17 shooting in a loss to the Sixers and had a 23.5% field goal percentage. The shoes would come out in the spring of 1985. And like we said, all of those things about them wanting to hopefully sell $3 million worth of merch in the first 3 years and doing 126 in the first year.
And the reason we're kind of bringing this up, if you happen to not see episode 5 and 6 last night of The Last Dance, part of it was they showed Jordan playing his last game at Madison Square Garden in '98, and he broke out the shoes that he wore in the first game there back in 1984, the first Jordans that he wore when that shoe came out, and he wore the exact same shoe. And he said it felt like, because they showed some of the newer shoes there, the difference. It had to be like blocks of cement. It had to feel like on his feet.
Playing basketball in the Jordan 1 is one of the bravest things I think a person can do. Because I don't know, I own plenty of them, and I couldn't imagine actually hooping in that version of a Jordan. Like, it seems remarkable, but...
And that was the whole reason they were built. It just shows you how fast technology changes.
Exactly right.
But take a listen to this now. Oh, do we not have that? The little snippet from the last thing about the... Yeah, here we go. Here is the whole thing where Jordan is talking about the shoes that he wore to the Garden.
By halftime, my feet are bleeding. But I'm having a good game. I don't want to take them off.
Michael. Oh, my goodness. A number of the players and even 2 of the officials are laughing. Michael Jordan now has 40 points. And only one guy has this level of artistry. Spinning in the lane for the slam. And Spike Lee is all over Michael Jordan. And Michael has a few words by way of retort.
Well, he just told him that he couldn't guard him. Right, see, he said, you can't guard me. You too little. Then he says, hey, you come out here. You come out. Spike said, I will, money.
Michael with 42, and if this was Michael Jordan's final game at Madison Square Garden, he leaves no doubt whatsoever that he exits just as he entered. The best there is.
Of course, it would turn out to not be his final game at the Garden.
I took the shoes off.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. He said his socks were bloody when he took the shoes off. There are people disputing that. Much like the Kurt Schilling bloody sock, there are people disputing and Jordan said there are pictures and or video of it, and there are those that are saying they'd like to see that, and they haven't.
Jason Ayer, the director, said, my crew is as good as it gets, and we haven't been able to find that yet.
Exactly. So interesting, but either way, he said his feet hurt pretty bad.
Yeah, which we can all believe, again.
Yeah, that we can believe.
The shoe he's wearing.
Yeah, so that was one of the things. The other thing we'll get into a little bit later is just how, if you are an alpha, as he was described at the 92 Dream Team, I think it was by Magic, right? Called him the Alpha last night, that you use whatever you can to find the edge. And that was something we saw repeatedly through the last 2 episodes of last night. Just whatever it was, whatever edge you felt like you needed to take, he was going to find it and get to that. And we'll get to that a little bit later. But speaking of that Dream Team, coming up, why going to the Dream Team was a twofold situation, and it wasn't just one player involved. It might have been another player and an ancillary effect, if you're willing to believe that. We'll get into all of that.
Support for the Best of Golic and Wingo podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Home today is so much more than it was yesterday, but at Rocket Mortgage, home is still all about you. During these challenging times, the top priority at Rocket Mortgage is the health and safety of the communities they serve. If you need mortgage assistance, their team is available 24/7 to answer questions and offer solutions. Whether that means saving money on your mortgage or finding a new way to navigate payments. From their home to yours, the team at Rocket Mortgage is with you. Visit rocketmortgage.com/Golic to learn more. Call for cost information and conditions. Equal housing lender. Licensed in all 50 states. NMLSconsumeraccess.org number 3030.
Brought to you by Capital One. You know how it feels when you've saved enough for that long-awaited home edition? Now, imagine saving enough for an edition on that edition. That's the feeling with Capital One, where a new savings account earns 5 times the national average. Capital One is helping you earn more towards your savings goals. This is Banking Reimagined. What's in your wallet? Capital One N.A., member FDIC.
Hope your Monday's off to a good start. Golic and Wingo, ESPN Radio, ESPN2. Mike Golic Jr. Trey with Wingo here with you as we're still getting through 2 more episodes of The Last Dance. Sunday night, episodes 5 and 6. The Last Dance recap is brought to you by AT&T. So there was a lot to digest in last night's last 2 episodes. The competitive nature of Jordan, the whole issue with the shoes. And then they got to one of the more controversial parts of Michael Jordan's career, his gambling and what it was and what it wasn't. Because you saw throughout the first few episodes, but really in this one, like, all he wanted to do was basically fight in terms of try and find some way to prove that he was better than everybody else.
Yeah, this gambling thing is that so after Game 1 of the 1993 Eastern Conference Finals with the Knicks. Oh, by the way, those were great videos. Just when you had enough of the bad boys in Detroit and the Bulls, the Knicks and the Bulls going at it.
I mean, that team had Oakley, Anthony Mason,
and Patrick Ewing.
They were big boys.
It was
Xavier McDaniel.
There was some fisticuffs going on there. But after that Game 1 was over, Jordan kind of wanted to get away from it all, and he and his father and some others went from New York to Atlantic City, and he was there gambling. And he says until about midnight or 1 o'clock, but newspapers said he was out until 2:30. He did score 36 points that night, and there was a game the next night. So he went to Atlantic City, got back. The papers say at 2:30, and there was a game that night. He did score 36, but the Bulls lost and fell behind 2-0 in that series. And then the whole thing started about gambling to the point where Jordan actually stopped talking to the media and the whole gambling. Do you have a gambling problem? You know, David Stern is all of a sudden commenting on the gambling. It kind of got really, really like a ball of fire.
You know what's a great way to convince people or try and convince people that you don't have a gambling problem? To do an interview with Ahmad Rashad wearing sunglasses indoors.
Well, that was the best part. I mean, even Ahmad alluded to that. It's like, yeah, it sounds great, but you're doing this thing with your sunglasses on indoors.
Yeah, you look like the guy that's got a gambling problem. So maybe someone needs to get with you style-wise and try and figure out how to portray that visually a little better.
I did love his one line, though, about that. I think it was in the interview with Connie Chung for NBC News. He said, I don't have a gambling problem. I have a competition problem.
That was the line to me. Because gambling, I mean, so by the way, he stopped talking to media after that, and then the Bulls won 4 straight and advanced to their 3rd straight NBA Finals. And then he did talk to the media to the point Mike brought up, and it was Ahmad Rashad, who basically that's who he drove around with, hung around with, and talked to the most there. But yeah, that was basically what he said. I don't have a gambling problem. I have a competitive problem. And David Stern, because it went to the league, they investigated, and the headline was no punishment for Jordan, and everybody. And I guess I remember back then even saying, what are you going to punish? Yeah. As they said, he broke no team rules. There were no curfew or anything.
Correct.
He broke no team rules, no league rules. He didn't do it. There were no rules like in the NFL had where you couldn't be in casinos and such. He went and he gambled. And he can gamble. As David Stern said, look at what he makes a year. He's going to gamble a lot. You know, he did nothing wrong. If the team wanted to be mad at him for staying out until 2:30 in the morning, well, that's their issue to be. But as far as the gambling, there was no issues.
Well, and this is like the notion of how we look at this stuff in general, though. Like, you don't got a problem unless you're losing in most people's minds, right?
Right.
Like, that's what it comes down to is, could Michael Jordan have had a gambling problem? Sure. None of us really know. None of us were in the casino with him, but he never lost all of his money on any of that.
He's worth $2.1 billion.
Yeah. But, like, I guess that's the thing is, like, you could still have a gambling problem if you are rich. The thing is that we only really start addressing it as an issue if you're losing tons of money or if it affects him on the court at all. Like, the bottom line is, again, like we see time and time again, no matter what you do off the court, if you are winning enough on it and if you are great enough on it, we don't really care.
Exactly. And to that point, Jordan Ayer, the director of The Last Dance, was on the Jalen Jacoby podcast, and he said Jordan wanted to address the issue of the gambling.
I got the sense he was eager to talk about gambling and the allegations and the reputation that he has. Being on the inside of it, Michael's worth almost $2 billion at this point. there is no amount of money that he's going to be able to gamble with someone else unless he's calling up Bill Gates and Bill's giving him 3.5 on the Orlando San Antonio game that day. It's not going to happen. So he's not gambling at this stage of his life, nor do I believe he was gambling at any stage of his life for financial gain. He's gambling because he loves games, loves it.
So before we get to the $57,000 check he had to write to somebody,
that may be the problem.
Yeah, as far as the competition, there were a couple of scenes. He was pitching quarters in the locker room with security guards, pitching quarters for $20.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what he was doing. And then on the plane, and this is true because I've been in these games, let me tell you real nervously. On the planes, he and some of the richer guys
Ron Harper
were playing cards. I think it was Will Perdue who was explaining this.
Yeah.
We're playing cards for thousands and thousands of dollars in the back of the plane. And in the front of the plane, Will Perdue said me and Steve Kerr and others were playing blackjack for $1 a hand. $1 a hand. He said Jordan would come up and say, what are you guys doing? So we're playing blackjack. And they're like, can I play? They're like, why do you want to play? We're playing $1 a hand. And he said, Jordan said to him, because I want to know that your money is now in my pocket. Yeah. I mean, that was the competitive edge of him. At some point, it didn't matter what the amount was.
And the security guard who he lost to while they were pitching quarters said the same thing. He took that $20. I'm going to put it in my
pocket. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and that, gambling in those regards, like, hell, I used to be on team planes where guys were rolling M&Ms down the aisle, and whoever M&M made it further to the back won whatever the pot was. Like guys in pro locker rooms will gamble on pretty much anything.
Yes, they will.
Well, wasn't it your time at Notre Dame where we made up those water games just to be competitive in the locker room?
Trick shot Monday. You'll find a way.
Trick shot Monday. You're just trying who could be the best at anything, right?
Exactly. And with Jordan, this is again proof that doing all of this stuff when you are a great basketball player means that we will find the positive spin on this, and we'll say you're the ultimate competitor regardless of what the situation may have actually looked like.
But then he did have to explain a check in court for a guy named, what was it, Slim Buller? Slim Buller, who he wrote a check for $57,000 for. He said it was a loan, but Buller got in trouble and was in court, was on trial, and Jordan had said, okay, I wrote it I had a gambling debt to him. Yeah. So people started saying, okay, is he having gambling debt issues? And is that going to go into anything about games for him to have a say on games, of which he flatly denied, said, I like to just gamble, basically play. He says gamble on me and just gamble alone with me, like blackjack and things like that. And golf, obviously.
Look, you're right. He didn't break when he went to Atlantic City. He didn't break any league rules, or there was no legality issues or team rules. But if you're gambling with a golf pro whose name is Slim, you're breaking a gambling rule. You never bet on a course with a golfer whose nickname is Slim. That is a red flashing warning sign right there. Stay away. Do not gamble with this guy.
I feel like doing it Slim is just one of those names that automatically, in most settings, will set off an alarm. something's going on here.
Exactly.
Slim, huh?
This guy shows up with a toothpick in his mouth and a really tanned neck on the golf course and wants to press. You say no.
I think that's the problem. The issue. Jordan couldn't say no.
That's exactly right. And this all came out the same time that book came out, Michael and Me, Our Desperate Cry for Help, and all that kind of stuff. So it was all wrapped into one thing that some people were obviously trying to sell something off Jordan, but when that check came out, I think it gave people a little pause.
Yeah, I think it made you raise an eyebrow a little bit.
Yeah, and then you realize that most of these guys were doing a lot. I mean, Charles Barkley talks about the millions of dollars he lost gambling. So make sure you tune into The Last Dance, a behind-the-scenes look at the 90s Chicago Bulls dynasty. The series continues this Sunday, 9 Eastern on ESPN. And listen to the wrap-up podcast hosted by Jalen and Jacoby immediately following the broadcast. That's presented by State Farm and AT&T, available wherever you get your podcasts. So we'll have much more on this coming up throughout the morning, but coming up next, America's team signed a quarterback over the weekend, and it had nothing to do with Dak. Or did it?
Currently, we're all living in a time of uncertainty, but one thing that these last few weeks have made crystal clear is that we all need to look out for each other and come together to protect the things we care about, including the planet we all share. That's why Allbirds is on a mission to leave the planet in better shape than they found it. Allbirds makes shoes from premium renewable materials, and they just announced the carbon emissions for all of their products before they offset them to zero. Allbirds will be listing the carbon footprint on all shoes moving forward, just like nutrition labels on food, but for your closet. Their shoes' average carbon footprint per product is equal to running 5 loads in the dryer or driving 19 miles in a car. They're committed to lowering their shoes' environmental impact over time, so they leave a better kind of footprint. Allbirds knows we can create a more sustainable future, but only if we hold ourselves accountable. With Allbirds, feel confident knowing you're wearing a shoe that's doing right by your feet and the planet. Learn more about their sustainable practices and find your pair at allbirds.com today.
Trade Pros. Ferguson is committed to making business with us the easiest part of your day. Ferguson.com is designed to help run your business from the office to the job site by making your day-to-day activities easier with 24/7 account access, unmatched online inventory, and on-the-go account management. And with our Pro Plus customer loyalty program, you can earn points with every online purchase, redeemable for merchandise, event tickets, trips, and more. Sign up today at Ferguson.com.
Golic and Wingo with you, ESPN Radio, ESPN2. Hope you're feeling good. Hope things are well. Hope you had a great weekend. Glad you're with us. We are presented by Progressive Insurance. Mike Golic Jr., Trey Wingo here with you. And I think that a lot of people, when we saw the signing of Andy Dalton to the Dallas Cowboys, their first reaction was, wait, what?
Yeah.
That happened? And so then you go through the process. Okay, Andy Dalton's been a starter for a long time in Cincinnati. Obviously, they drafted Joe Burrow, number 1 overall in the draft out of LSU. So clearly he is going to be their future. So Andy Dalton is signing with the Dallas Cowboys. Well, why would he sign with the Dallas Cowboys? What's the meaning there? Because Andy Dalton has played very well at times. He's been into the postseason, but there is the offer out there to Dak Prescott, and they're trying to work out a deal. And there's a lot of things you can sort of surmise from that if you want, but sometimes the math is the math and the numbers are the numbers. And I thought that Ed Werder, who said this on Sunday morning on ESPN Radio, basically summed it up best. If you just look at what the two contract offers are, it should tell you a lot.
I think a lot of people have interpreted it as a not so subtle, thinly veiled shot at Dak Prescott to sign a long-term contract agreement with the Cowboys. You know, he is the only quarterback in the history of the franchise that they've been unable to sign, the first franchise tag quarterback in Cowboys history. But I think if you look at, I think everything is revealed if you look at the circumstances and the contract numbers. On one hand, they've offered Dak Prescott a multi-year contract that would make him the highest paid player in the entire NFL. They signed Andy Dalton to a one-year contract that guarantees him $3 million. So one, to me, is a contract for a franchise quarterback, and the other is a routine deal for a backup wanting to reestablish his value in a league where there's no opportunity to start at the moment.
And all of this is Time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. And I think that's a fair way to look at this, right? Because I think we were all surprised that Dalton would go to the Cowboys.
I think it's a fair way to look at this, but to be clear, until Dak Prescott is signed, everything that the Cowboys do is about Dak Prescott.
Correct.
Like, this is about Dak Prescott. Every move made and everything said until he puts pen to paper will be about Dak Prescott, because that is the sole focus of this offseason and really going into last offseason. And because it's dragged on that long, everything is going to have a tentacle that reaches back to him.
Just amazing. We want to put every available quarterback in Jacksonville. We just don't want Gardner Minshew to be the starter for some reason. And we love the guy, love him,
Absolutely.
But we keep looking at as a spot where you could go in and start. We keep looking at New England as the possibility of a spot where you can go in and start. So any veteran quarterback who had been a longtime starter, and now we still have Cam Newton out there, you know, because Jameis is in New Orleans behind a Hall of Famer, and now Andy is going to be presumably behind Dak. I look at this as a signing, quite honestly, as a smart signing.
Yes.
The Dallas Cowboys window is still open to win. They have veterans on that team. They have the ability to win that division, make a run in the NFC. And I think they're setting themselves up for, okay, if we sign Dak Prescott, which I still think they will do, Cooper Rush is our backup. Yeah, and Dak has been nothing but there when they say with the best ability is availability, well, then he's been the best because he has been available. But if something were to happen, I think that the team still felt if we get a quarterback like Andy Dalton, we're still in pretty good shape with the team that we have around him.
Yeah, look, Louis Riddick summed this up really well recently. He said, look, a backup quarterback at this day and age is like a top 30 position on your team. I mean, you have your starters on both sides of the ball, and then you have the guys that you count on to come in there and sort of fill in as backups. And that backup quarterback now has to be perceived as one of the best because we've seen it. Look what happened last year with the Saints. Drew Brees goes down. Teddy Bridgewater walks in, and that team goes 5-0 in those starts without him. The Cowboys historically, whether it was Romo or it had to be Romo because Dak hasn't missed a game on purpose, when they've had, whether it was Matt Castle or they had very little success with their backup quarterback. And a guy like Andy Dalton, who's been to 3 Pro Bowls and hasn't won a playoff game but has been in a lot of postseason games, what they're just doing is giving themselves a $3 million insurance policy. But you're right, Junior. Until the Dak Prescott deal is signed, everything's going to be looked at with that sideways eyebrow, like, really, this is what happened here.
Well, and especially in this situation with a guy in Andy Dalton, and I know I saw Dan Orlovsky, our very own football analyst, point this out, that the stats through 4 years were very similar for a lot of these guys outside of the interceptions, which is almost 30 higher, which after we just publicly drag Jameis Winston, we should probably point out is a bad thing if you're looking to play quarterback. But it's like all of these things at a time where this is delicate with Dak Prescott, right? Like, we know it's not a huge shot across the bow because of the way things are set up, but he's not attending their virtual offseason program. We've finally seen the little bits of indication that it's ruffled his feathers, and so now you go out there, and part of this is the offseason that we're in, but it's also, all right, a guy that was a starter in this league that when he's had good weapons has played pretty well. We all look at this Dallas team and say, yeah, all right, you know what? If you had Andy Dalton had to go out there and you look at the Dallas weapons right now, they're probably not going to do too bad.
Yeah, as far as those stats between those two in the first 4 years, they both have 40 wins. Their completion percentage is within 2 of each other. Their total passing yards is within 1,000. The touchdowns, 97 for Dak, 99 for Dalton. The biggest issue is what you just said, the interceptions. 36 interceptions for Dak, 66 interceptions for Andy Dalton. And so I think more of it that way than any kind of threat to Dak, though it still kind of befuddles all of us that deal hasn't gotten done. The only team I can remember that openly just disregarded a backup quarterback, and he used to say it, was Bill Polian. Yeah. When they had Peyton Manning in Indianapolis, Bill was like, if we lose Peyton, we're not doing anything anyway, so why am I going to invest any kind of cap money at all in a backup? And by the way, it worked because when Peyton couldn't play and they had a no backup, they were bad enough to end up getting Andrew Luck.
Yeah. Timing worked out really well there.
By the way, New England heard that.
Yeah. To that point, though, it's funny you say that because there's a great story out there that I'm going to have to use the ESPN2 version of The Last Dance, not the ESPN version, because this will have to be bleeped. But John Gruden was working for us for Monday Night Football, and they were scouting, one of the games for the Colts. They went to a practice, and they noticed that Peyton was getting all the reps, and they were getting no reps to Jim Sorgi at all. And so he went up to one of the coaches on the staff and said, "Hey, how come you're not getting your backup quarterback any run in practice to get him ready for the game?" And the unnamed coach says, "Because if 18 goes down, we're blanked, and we don't practice blanked." It's just one of the greatest lines of all time. But the Cowboys are interesting, right? Because they've had a bunch of Todd Archer, I thought, had a really good column on this on ESPN.com. Outside of the last couple of years when it's been Cooper Rush, who's been the backup for Dak Prescott, this is sort of the way the Cowboys have operated. In 07 and 08, Tony Romo's backup was Brad Johnson, who made about $5.5 million. After that, it was John Kitna, who made close to $8 million. So, and after that, Kyle Orton. So they've had guys before. They've gone down this paradigm before, but what makes it interesting, obviously, as you pointed out, Junior, is that they're doing it with a guy who has a proven track record, but they still haven't got their guy signed.
And I wonder if there's any correlation between that idea that we just talked about, where if you've got a future Hall of Fame quarterback or a top 5 quarterback in the league, are you going to spend money in draft capital on a guy that's your backup? Or are you saying, you know what, our starter is so much better than anyone we could possibly spend to put behind him that the drop-off is going to be so precipitous that why even bother wasting time on that? Like, you weren't going to get a backup relative to this that was going to be anywhere even close to what Peyton Manning was going to mean to your offense.
Correct.
And so there was always going to be a dive in that. Like, look at Seattle. Has Seattle ever really spent any considerable time or means putting someone behind Russell Wilson of value?
No.
Because they know if you take Russell Wilson out of that equation in Seattle, the house of cards falls apart. Like, there is no one that in those circumstances can do what Russ can do in that offense. And so I'm not sure what you're going to do.
Well, the only one there was the joke was Matt Flynn, who was there supposed to be ahead of Russell.
Supposed to be the starter.
At the very beginning of that.
Yeah. And then Russell Wilson said, "Hold my beer." So all of that is Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. No contract, no compromise.
Real quick, Des Bryant, former Cowboy,
Yeah.
he had some words about this. He said, nothing against Andy Dalton because I think he's a great player, but the Cowboys are extremely out of line. Pay Dak. I watched the Cowboys pay Tony Romo twice, once without a winning record. I guess the Cowboys are viewing the quarterback position as plug in a piece because of the dominant offense. So he not happy with that. But we just keep seeing player after player after player get signed before Dak. And again, it seems the issue is more the length of the contract. Dak wanting that 4 years so he can maybe kick the can again at the age of right around 30 or 29, 30. And the Cowboys love those longer contracts. So that still seems to be the kick, the sticking point.
And I guess it's just the fact that there's any sticking point this long to the negotiations. Like Patrick Mahomes just came out over the weekend and actually spoke about the upcoming contract negotiation with him in Kansas City, who exercised his 5th-year option and basically saying, I'm trusting them to do the right thing here.
Yeah.
And we all know that they will because it's a no-brainer.
Yes, because he's Hall of Famer Patrick Mahomes.
So with Dak Prescott, it has taken this long because clearly, to some extent, it's a brainer.
Yeah, that's a really nice way of putting it there. And the other thing we have to sort of factor into this is what we're going through, right? I mean, Andy Dalton is from Texas. He was born in Katy, Texas. I think went to high school in Katy, Texas, which is right outside Houston. But his family lives in Dallas right now. So the idea for him, hey, in a situation where I may be changing teams, but I don't have to uproot my entire family in a very unusual time, I don't think you can discount that part of this either from his side of it. Wanting to get that done and just have that put to bed.
Well, because it's interesting with both him and with Jameis. Now, I don't know how true these are, but at least the rumblings you heard was the only other team really involved was Pittsburgh, right?
Yes.
Very similar situation. And Dad, you brought this up last week. The kind of quarterbacks we've been talking about, if you are a contender, were very appealing to you, especially contenders with older quarterbacks like the Saints and the Steelers, both of whom have experienced some level of injury to that starter in the last year or so.
Absolutely. Really quickly, you guys mentioned the note about the 5th-year option. How about the note of the 2017 draft?
It's unbelievable.
Isn't it incredible? Only one player in the top 5 picks of that draft got their 5th-year option picked up. That was Myles Garrett. The number 1 pick, Myles Garrett of the Cleveland Browns, got his 5th year picked up. Number 2, Trubisky, no. Number 3, Solomon Thomas, 49ers, no. Number 4, Leonard Fournette, Jacksonville, no. Number 5, Titans wide receiver Corey Davis, no. That does not bode well for those picks in that draft, that's for sure.
And maybe we should have seen this Andy Dalton thing coming just because he's the Red Rifle. Jason Garrett, Brandon Weeden, Andy Dalton. Do the Cowboys have a corner of the market on red-haired quarterbacks?
They have a redhead thing.
There you go.
Interesting.
There you have it. So, bet you nobody else saw that side of it.
I'm not going to lie. Didn't.
Found the difference.
Probably smarter. Okay, let's do something much more significant than the color of your quarterback's hair.
Yeah, Golic and Wingo here on ESPN Radio. And if you've been listening to us for any stretch of time over the last month or so, you've probably seen us or heard us talking about hometown heroes. And this idea when we really started to get deep into this quarantine. We saw examples of it around us, but you hear examples so many other places of people just stepping up in our everyday lives because the athletes and entertainers of the world are going to get noticed when they do things. When the All-In Challenge happens, we stand up and we notice because it's a big deal and it raises a ton of money, and we all understand it. It's worth celebrating. But we thought, all right, well, so are the everyday things that maybe go unnoticed by the larger world. And so we wanted to shine a light on those. And so we asked people to tweet us. We asked people to go to our website, golicandwingo.com, and tell us a story about someone in their area who was stepping up and doing something great during the pandemic. And we wanted to shine a light on it. And we wanted to throw it out using our platform and try and celebrate it as best we could. And the results we got were staggering. We were so overwhelmed by what we saw and the things that people were doing that we said, all right, we need to try and figure out something else we can do to say thank you because this is extraordinary what we're seeing from people. And so normally we do the Wingo Cup every year. Right. It's a great event that we're able to do, and it's a great thing that we're able to share with some people. And we were not going to be able to do it this year. So we went to our friends at Ferguson, who are going to be our partners on the Wingo Cup, and asked if we could redirect the funds a little bit. They couldn't have jumped at it fast enough.
And we couldn't thank them enough for that.
And it's incredible. And so what that allowed us to do was to be able to say thank you in the form of a small financial gift in the form of $5,000 that we're able to, try and celebrate and share with some of our hometown heroes. And we're going to get to celebrate and share about 20. We did 10 last week. We did 2 a day, and we're going to do 2 a day every day for this week going forward. That, and we're going to find creative ways to say thank you to a bunch of other people in this process too, and already have with the help of some of our friends. But this has allowed us to also talk to a lot of our hometown heroes, to reach out and actually have some conversations with one like Gustavo from Oviedo, Florida, that we got to talk to this weekend, Dad.
Yeah, he's a managing partner in a restaurant called Rock and Brews, and he basically stayed open for 2 reasons. 1, to pay his employees. He made sure he stayed open to pay his employees, and 2, to feed people in the area, to make sure he made up, as he called, quarantine packs of meals for customers. It was on Easter Sunday alone. He fed over 1,200 people with that.
Wow.
So it's incredible. Of the twofold reason was, again, pay his people to make sure they stayed on the payroll and feed the people in the area that needed to be fed. And we've gotten a chance to talk to these people. It's been fantastic. So here's a little bit of our chat with Gustavo.
It was a no-brainer when we got the news back in late March. And immediately we said, look, we will just need to do whatever we need to do to turn a restaurant into a big commissary kitchen almost, and start thinking about what we need to do to first keep the restaurant open, the community fed, and most importantly, our people. So we stayed open, and we came up with these quarantine packs that we called. We called some partners. They gave us some good deals. Our awesome produce company donated produce, so we're giving produce away.
It's just remarkable, and to do all that, like he said, at cost. Like they're not turning a profit, but they're making enough to pay employees, and to just try and be something that everyone in the area could count on. And that was, it's always interesting hearing, certainly from Gustavo and our other hometown heroes, but to hear from the people that nominated them about what they mean to the area, or what they mean to a specific group of people, I think is always the really telling part, because we haven't talked to anyone yet who's been there promoting themselves. Correct. It's always the team, the team, the team. It's always what everyone around me is doing and why they believe they're not special, even though we've clearly seen reasons they are.
I loved what he said right at the beginning when we started talking to him. It was a no-brainer. Yeah. We were going to stay open to pay our people and to feed people. Like, it wasn't even a thought to close, because they felt like they had a responsibility.
And that's why we want to thank the people in those communities that are doing that. So thank you. And again, we'll keep this coming. And again, thanks to the folks at Ferguson for helping us get through this. So congratulations to Gustavo. So in partnership with our friends at Ferguson, Golic and Wingo would like to celebrate and thank our hometown heroes. And we certainly appreciate all of those. You mentioned the first-year options, or fifth-year options, rather, on the first-round picks for 2017. Obviously, one of the big matzo balls out there was Mitchell Trubisky.
Right.
This, to me, is the clearest indication yet that Nick Foles is probably going to be the starting quarterback going forward.
I would think so as well. I didn't think there was any way they were going to offer Mitch that fifth-year option. I mean, they're paying him, $4 million this year. He'll count 9 against the cap. You getting that option. Now, he gets injured. He's guaranteed over $20 million, and you're not going to take that chance.
No chance. And we've seen this play out before like this, so pretty clearly spells the writing on the wall.
So then the question becomes what is Mitchell Trubisky's future in the league?
Well, when you're the second pick overall, you know what you're going to get?
Another chance.
Not only another chance, you're going to get another chance and another chance. Yeah. That's what you get when you're that high of a pick. When you're a lower pick, you get maybe that one chance, and then you're done. When you're that high a pick, you're going to get multiple chances.
It's going to be interesting to see how that changes next year as opposed to this offseason, right? Because we just watched the number 1 overall pick in a former draft have to take a backup job.
Yeah, that's true.
Off his rookie contract. Like, that was a real thing we just watched Jameis Winston do. And we all believe Jameis Winston is a probably markedly better quarterback than Mitchell Trubisky.
Top 2 picks of the 2015. Marcus Mariota was the second one. Pick. He's also
a backup
in Oakland
or Las Vegas.
Dalton's now a backup. Trubisky will certainly be a backup.
Dalton was a second-round pick, though. I think it was a second-round pick.
I think you're right.
But I guess regardless, like, Dalton is a guy who has had multiple contracts and has been a competent starter in this league. But he's a little further along. Like, you're right, Dad. We're used to seeing 1 and 2 overall picks. You immediately get thrown back into another job that you can compete for.
Yep.
And right now we saw Jameis, and whether it's the COVID-19 situation in the offseason and the effect it's had or whatever, we saw 1 and 2. Both have to go take clear backup jobs, at least at this point.
Okay, so I want to ask this since we're talking about backup quarterback jobs. We talked about it last week. We had Stefania Bell on because she did the piece. on Alex Smith.
Yeah.
That was an unbelievable E60 story about that injury and what he had to do after the infection and coming back. And that thing ended with him still wanting to play and training to play football. Do we at all think Alex Smith is going to be able to come back and play? Number one, I can't believe he wants to, but I guess I can. I guess I can't believe I don't want that to end my career. I want to go back and show that I could get back out there. So I guess I could understand that. But, man, that would scare me to death. That piece was incredible.
Well, scare him to death, scare his family to death, too. Right. I mean, I think at some extent you saw the toll it took on that. We saw Elizabeth, his wife, was interviewed fairly frequently throughout the E60, and she almost had to make the call about whether it was his leg or his life while he was under in that situation. The stress of that, my God.
I remember one of the money quotes from watching that on Friday. By the way, kudos to everybody who put that thing together. Stefania, Ben Hauser, all the people from E60. They did a wonderful, wonderful job. But when they said to his mom, just so you know, we're in life-saving mode and then leg-saving mode in that order.
Yeah.
I mean, to your point, Junior, though, give his wife all the credit. She was like, take whatever you need to take to make sure he comes out of that operating
This was a guy who 2 days after the initial surgery was supposed to be home.
Yeah.
59 days later, he first leaves the hospital. After that infection, when they cleared it all out, it looked like a shark attack.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable what they had to do.
Top to bottom, it was remarkable.
It was. If you haven't seen it, it's worth your time.
Yes, it
is.
is.
It's an hour worth your time, and you will have so much more respect for Alex Smith after that. Golic and Wingo is brought to you by AutoZone. Need a part for your car and need it fast? AutoZone has more ways for you to get it however you want, like free next-day delivery or free same-day pickup, in-store or curbside. The choice is up to you. Restrictions apply. Get in the zone. AutoZone. Coming up, more on why Isaiah and maybe another Pistons player were left off the Dream Team. Stay with us.